just said. So let me tell, while talking about the importance of value systems in our life, values in your life, I am using the term value not in a very strict sense, but in a very broader sense. So it comes to my mind that one of the monumental structures that is made by the Chinese is the Great Wall of China. We know that it is one among the seven wonders of the world. And this Great Wall of China is the only object, man-made object, visible from space. It is said by scientists. So such a gigantic structure was made by the Chinese, maybe some Chinese emperors. It was built for hundreds of years by thousands of people who are engaged to protect the Chinese from the invaders, from the attack of foreign, for the safety and the security of Chinese people. They have constructed such a great wall for their citizens. The point is, so much has been spent, so much labor was done to erect such a structure, and for the purpose for which it was done is the safety and security, to protect the safety and security of the citizens of China from foreign invaders, from attackers from outside. It has failed in its purpose because of one thing. It was attacked, and attackers and invaders came inside, not by scaling the wall of the Great Wall of China. They could not by breaking the Great Wall of China. It was so strong that it was unbreakable, it was thought. But what they did is, they have broken the morale of the human beings. That means they have bribed the guards, those who are manning the wall, and they opened the gate. So they came inside, and the attackers, and the safety and security was, in this case, happened because of the immorality of the guards, those who are manning it. So this is the values that lacked. We could not build character, we could not build values, we inculcated values in them, but we could create a great structure, a gigantic structure to protect, which was completely useless without great values that we have not inculcated in the minds of people. So I can extract this to a little bit more in our own context to make my point more appropriate and relevant. We must learn that the mightiest army that we have, the sophisticated weapons like Bofors gun and Rafale jet fighter planes, cannot help the country to defend itself if people in the helm of affairs are corrupt or possess no virtue. Similarly, always this thought came to my mind that when I was principal in Model College Devgarh, the building was so massive and so good and so nice to look at. Classrooms are there. But always this thought came in, this is very good. I was very happy to be there in a very nice building with 21 air conditioners and very good classrooms with modern gadgets. Everything is there. But this came to my mind. All these things are there, and qualified teachers are also there. In spite of very intelligent teachers, qualified teachers, in spite of a great building with modern gadgets of computers and all these things. If our students do malpractice in the examination, do cheating in the examination, we have failed in imparting the right kind of education to them, and the purpose of the great gigantic structure, the great sophisticated building and the great luxury is a waste. So my conviction is that here, what is the cause of such a thing? Because you have valued success in examination is more important than acquisition of knowledge, development of personality, and building moral character. So if you value success in examination more important for you, then you don't mind cheating in the examination. But if you value honesty in your life, then definitely you will not cheat but do hard work to succeed in examination. We have just discussed, and the discussion was also, Professor Sahu also has defended the scientific development, quoting Russell. And a lot of us were saying in this line that actually science can solve all our problems. In that respect, I have to also say that science and technology has excelled in last 400 years, four centuries, mainly. This is gigantic leap science and technology has taken. The growth of scientific knowledge is very much useful, and it is quite relevant. We are all getting the benefit of science and technology. But it is not enough if it is not ethically used. We may live in a very beautiful air-conditioned buildings, which our forefathers could never dreamt of. But we are living with fear. What fear? Fear of a nuclear war, a man-made pandemic, the consequence of climate change, greenhouse effect, depletion and hole in the ozone layer, and global warming, to mention few. The situation is like we are living in Mother Earth, that is a place where the mind is never without fear. I am not talking to the last part, the head is held high or not. Progress in science and technology without moral progress is bound to be a disaster. That is what my observation is. The cause of the environmental crisis today is due to a cultural crisis because it is a value crisis. This is due to unethical use of science and technology. It is also a failure in realizing the value of environment. Values are central to a culture. There cannot be a value neutral culture, be it aesthetic or moral. Some may not agree with this. They can think of a value neutral culture, but to me, value neutral culture I don't think is possible or difficult to find. We know that culture is not static. It is a generational and dynamic. We compare culture with a flow of a river. So the history of society is characterized by the cultural revolution or cultural crisis or a social decadence. So moral values are progressive as well as regressive at times. Human civilization has come a long way from the man in nature to the modern civilized man. The path was not very straightforward. Human conduct or behavior with regard to the kind of relation we have with the society, the kind of relation we have with nature, the kind of relation we have with our own self, and if you do believe in a God, the kind of relation that we have with the divine determines our moral excellence. The moral value of one generation may differ with preceding or succeeding generations. A set of ethical rules and principles may not be the same in all ages. Which actions are right or wrong, which deeds are virtuous or vicious, depends on the set of moral principles of that generation. The information we have from evolutionary biology, psychology, sociology, and anthropology help us in evaluating and understanding the value system of the society and its moral progress. That means to evaluate our moral progress or moral regress, we must have to take information from descriptive ethics. The descriptive ethics we are taught that the ethics is prescriptive. That's normative ethics. But we can have a term like descriptive ethics, which is provided by evolution or biology, psychology, anthropology, or sociology. We can take these informations and evaluate our society. Now I will turn to what is a cultural crisis. Cultural crisis in a society is characterized by degradation of moral values. It is when the society disposes of the moral principles. Degradation of moral values happens when a regressive value is given priority over a progressive value. For example, as I said, if one values honesty as the best policy, he will not cheat in examination. But he values success in examination, he may accept cheating. It is because he gives honesty a backseat. If there are corrupt people in a society, I will not call this thing as a cultural, as highly of a symbol of a cultural crisis. If there are thieves in the society, I will not consider it as a sign of a cultural crisis. But to me, a cultural crisis will be let me say that no society is ideally perfect. Therefore, I will say that this is not a sign of cultural crisis. But cultural crisis really will be when moral crisis happens. The example is when a corruption is acceptable to that society and corrupt people are not disliked but respected. Let us see what happens with respect to a job which is liked in our society, immediate society right now. A job is attractive if there is a scope for an income which is neither legal nor ethical. I used to hear from people that they prefer grooms for the marriage of their daughters if the groom is getting a salary beyond his legal income. That is a bribe. More bribe, the more respectable the dodge, and he is a better candidate. So a person is more respected after a vigilance raid. This is my life experience that I have seen, that how people look at a person after a vigilance raid in his house and income tax raid in his house, where lot of wealth beyond his income were recovered. The man is known as wealthy, hence a big man. He is looked upon as an achiever. These are few examples which indicate a cultural crisis in society. That means corrupt people are there. That's not a big problem. The big problem is that we have accepted corruption internally. So that is the sign of a cultural crisis. That is a decadent society. I am reminded of one of the articles written by Professor Rajendra Prasad in 1982, that he says such a society as a decadent society which considers moral principles disposable. A moral, he marks it, and a moral imbalance is between the past values that a society has and the present values which with the present values that he is emphasized. If that imbalance, instead of the new values are not fulfilling the old values, but are regressive, perhaps he would mean to say. Again, coming to the cultural pattern of the West, I say the cultural pattern of the West is materialistic in the sense, not in the sense that Professor Mishra has said in his essay, in the sense that it has given all importance to industrial growth, which is not sustainable. They wrongly believed that all the things and beings are to be exploited for their national development. Looking at the colonial age, I would say, the lust for luxuries and greed for accumulation of more and more wealth is the worst moral crisis. This cultural pattern leads to consumerism, and this moral crisis is the cause of ecological crisis, which is manifested in global warming, climate change, greenhouse effect. and depletion in the ozone layer as well as a hole in the ozone layer. Besides the ethical crisis, a simple let us to this issue. Let us look at this issue not purely as an ethical crisis or a moral crisis. Even a cost effectiveness analyst or a cost benefit analyst will easily calculate that what price we are giving for the kind of development is undertaken for the last few centuries. That is, the exploitative, unsustainable development we have. For that, what price we have given and what price we are going to give in future. Here it comes to my mind. We are more careful of our next generation, my child, my son, my daughter, my grandson, my granddaughter, their future. If you are really concerned and give a lot of importance to their future, we cannot so irresponsibly destroy their future. They may be wanting a very sophisticated life with the modern gadgets, technology, and industrial growth and consumerism. But what we are snatching away from them, this generation at least, is most valuable. That is, we are not able to realize. That is the crisis. Let us examine the Indian traditional value systems. Really, they do guide us to overcome the cultural crisis. It is a fact that we cannot make people moral. This is what I believe. Make people moral by imposition of moral rules or principles. An authority which gives a list of duties can hardly make people moral. So, morality comes from within. So, one has to be convinced that what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, and why it is bad or why it is good, why it is right, and why it is wrong. Unless and until somebody is not convinced, we cannot, morality will not come from within. The imposition of moral laws and principles and legal principles will not make them moral. There is a debate. So there is a debate here. I will go to the debate, but I will not involve in the debate right now because this is a very vast topic. Many think that there is no ethics at all, or there is a lack of ethics in Indian philosophy, or there is negligence of ethics in Indian philosophy, and the debate with regard to lack of ethics in Indian philosophy. Even some say there is no ethics worth the name in Indian philosophical tradition. British philosopher John Mackenzie. I will not go to Stace or W.T. Stace and others, but I will confine to J. Mackenzie, American Indologist, E.W. Hopkins, Indian philosopher B.K. Motilal or Matilal, P.T. Raju, and even N.K. Devraj. Or doubt that there is a systematic approach towards ethics in Indian philosophy. To Professor Daya Krishna, philosophy is characterized as spiritual or non-spiritual because of the way it conceives the nature of reality and not because of the manner in which it conceives the ultimate or the highest ideal of man. Let me read this very important quote by Professor Daya Krishna. Philosophy is characterized as spiritual or non-spiritual because of the way it conceives the nature of reality and not because of the manner in which it conceives the ultimate or the highest ideal of man. Again, Professor Raghuveer Singh says the ultimate goal of life, the summum bonum, is not value, but paramartha, as Indian tradition would have it. It is held by many that Indian philosophy gives lots of importance to moksha, liberation, mukti, nibbana, kaivalya, etc. But this is considered the summum bonum of life. Ignorance or avidya is considered as the cause of suffering and bondage. Lack of spiritual knowledge is the cause of bondage. So spiritual knowledge is essential for getting moksha. So spiritual knowledge is knowledge of reality. Hence, it is supremely important. But ethical or moral life which involves will is not given due importance. So ethics is neglected in Indian philosophy. This is just a part of the debate that I have said. I agree to some extent with the view that in contemporary context, study of logic, metaphysics, and epistemology is given great importance, and study of ethics is neglected in Indian philosophy. But to say that Indian philosophy lacks moral philosophy is not doing justice to Indian philosophical systems and classical philosophical literature of India. It is misplaced and implausible, according to the language of Professor Pradeep Gokhale and Meena Kelkar. I will not enter into this debate where we find a different view by Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya, who doesn't like these views of these eminent scholars. But this is itself a topic to be discussed. In the scope of my topic right now, I'm not entering there, but simply my simple submission is, I will make an attempt to see Indian philosophy, the relevance of Indian ethos, not only to find its weaknesses only, but also to see its strength, which made it survive and thrive for thousands of years in spite of great adversity. So it is difficult to agree with the view that Indian philosophy lacks ethics. If we find ethics in Indian philosophy from a Western philosophical perspective, we may fail to find it. Like the concept of dharma cannot be understood from the Western perspective of concept of religion, and the concept of darsana cannot be understood from the Western idea of philosophy. Ethics cannot be found in Indian philosophy as classified in Western way into deontology, consequentialism, or virtue theory, or virtue ethics. In classical Indian context, philosophy, religion, metaphysics, ethics are intermingled and not systematically classified or separated as in the Western philosophical tradition. The sources of Indian value systems and moral philosophy is mainly the religious philosophical tradition. The Vedas, the Upanishads, Jainism, Buddhism, epics of Mahabharata and Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, Dhammapada and Jataka tales of Buddhism, and Hitopadesh, Nitisatakas of Bhartrihari, as well as the Purusharthas, the Varnashram systems, which provide a categorical framework and a temporal framework of life and existence. So the practical aspect of life has been addressed. In all these sources, there must be much more, but I will not go to all these doctrines right now. The scope will be very wide. Hence, I have chosen to see the bearings of moral philosophy taught in the epics, fables, and ancient tales to convince one to lead a moral life in general. So it is relevant to ask, what is the role of a philosopher in this context? Philosopher is not to preach, is not a counselor, is not a psychological counselor. His role is to communicate and convince by means of arguments based on information from descriptive ethics of psychology, anthropology, sociology, and evolutionary biology. Philosopher can play a role with regard to value education and character building education. Virtue ethics emphasizes on character based on morality. Aristotle would say, by inculcating virtues, habits, By inculcating virtuous habits, will build character so that people will likely make the right choice when they face ethical challenges or complex ethical situations. So people with a character trait can make better moral reasoning in a complex moral situation. A moral philosophy is better communicated by means of literature. Literature, as you know, is a philosophy put into images. And it is more particularly a moral philosophy put into images and characters. To bring home my point, I will try to give an example of a legend of ancient India. The legend is that there is a king named Amar Shakti in South India. The name of his kingdom was Mahila Rupya. He has three sons. All were wayward and dull in study. One of the sons will be the king one day. The king was concerned about the education of the future king. He strongly believed that the ruler must be well educated. He searched for the right teacher who can educate his sons. The king invited the learned scholars of his country assembled there. He told before them his problem and his crisis, that how to educate his dullard students, dullard sons, because they're going to take, one of them is at least going to take a great responsibility as the ruler of the state. The king offered him, at last the king chosen one old scholar, and he agreed to teach the princess. So the king offered him great wealth, to which the scholar politely refused. He is saying that I don't sell knowledge. But I can take the responsibility of educating your children, your sons. So the teacher could understand that he cannot teach his students from the texts and the sutras and the technicalities. In order to teach the inherent wisdom of the texts, he devised a way of telling fables. He took his students to the shade of a tree. He started with the fable. Asti Godavari Tire Vishal Salmali Taru. This is the story of a Panchatantra, the first line, told by Vishnu Sharma and how it Panchatantra started as a fable, which has the moral wisdom. So Panchatantra, as you know, is divided into 5 parts. It is the Mitra Bheda, which is awareness, which makes you aware of the villains who destroys good relationship between friends. So friendship can be protected by being aware of the evil-minded who tries to spoil mutual relationship. Then Mitra Lava says that mutual love can help us to grow together. Then Kako Lukyakyam says that the danger of deceit and treason, the ungratefulness, is highest pretension and duplicity of people. Labdha Pranasam, it says about human greed and how human greed can cause great suffering in spite of abundance of wealth and prosperity. Aparikshatakkam, the story of the mongoose and the Brahmin, where the Brahmin kills the mongoose when he's saved the life of his son. So this tells about the value of misjudgment, premature conclusion, decision taken in haste and without contemplation. Subsequently, these fables of Vishnu Sharma was in the 12th century was enlarged and extended to Hitopadesh by Narayan. So the legacy goes on. These fables are stories full of virtues and vices like distrust and trust, sacrifice and treachery, hypocrisy and honesty. They deal with the moral philosophies which deal with the practical wisdom as well as socio-political, economic values for ordinary citizens as well as rulers. So the stories of a Panchatantra are more popular outside the country of its origin. Let me conclude by another example which represents Indian value systems. The Jataka tales from Theravada Buddhism, which is just we have gone through from Ramakanta Babu's lecture, and we have a lot of discussion. Here, Jataka stories I am emphasizing because it is told by some historians that Jataka tales are the first didactic, that is Hetu Shastra or Hetuvada. That Jataka Hita, not Hetuvada, it is the Hitovada of the world, the first didactic. It is a story of the past life of a Buddha, which he himself might have said, or it is said by somebody else, the Buddhists later on. The most important aspect of some Jataka tales depicts progressive moral values. Which attracted me most in Jataka stories is there is a voice of protest against the decadent social systems and religious obscurantism of the then society. This is the tale of Buddha ki Sukara Jataka. A tiger has ordered, the story is small, I can tell the story in 1 minute. That is, a tiger has ordered that every day one boar, that is Sukara, this is a wild bear, should offer himself as the food of the tiger in the jungle. This became the norm of the society in jungle. The scared boars helplessly obeying the order of the tiger. But one young boar thought about the unjust law and tried to overcome this. He was not prepared to follow the path given by his peer group or the society. Whatever the society was following, he was not ready to follow. He wanted to go beyond that. He united all boars and tell them the unjust that is being done to them, revolted. And subsequently, they were united and killed the tiger. But the most important line of this story is said by the goddess of jungle, Vanadevi. Vanadevi said that I congratulate the boar community, the Sukara community, for this victory. Their unity could vanquish the powerful enemy. So the Jataka's tales carry the message of practical ethics, which involve the conduct of ordinary men as well as the ruler. The Panchashila, the Noble Eightfold Path, and the 10 perfections are put into images and characters which are the protagonists of Jataka tales. We find the Jataka tales of a lion's skin in Plato's writings also. And the Rejabadha Jataka, which is placed in Canterbury Tales of Chaucer in 14th century. A great moral philosophy is also found in George Orwell's Animal Farm. It is told also in the fable form. I think I have just initiated the ethical bearings of ancient Indian literature of fables, which has profound philosophical undertones, moral philosophical undertones in them, and have great potentiality to communicate value systems to ordinary people and even the dullest of the students in our classes. A student of Vedanta, while reading the Mahavakyas, gives importance to the Mahavakya, I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi. But more important Mahavakya is Tattvamasi, you are Brahman. I and you are not different. Does it not say a profound ethics for any age to come, for any time to come, for eternity. Thank you all. Thank you all once again.
Sir, please unmute yourself, sir. Ranjit sir, please unmute yourself. Ranjit sir.
Yes.
Sir,
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes.
Audible, sir.
All right. Thank you. So, Professor Kailash Chandra Das has given very elaborately the issues associated with the cultural crisis of the present time, and he has also brought the ethical studies of the ancient times, and which further gives us this picture and this view. Prior to enter into what he said, let me say this, that he has brought the examples from Hitobodesa, Panchatantra and Jataka tales. And you see, our generation, up to our generation, we are more or less acquainted with these things. And maybe these things might have shaped our moral point of view. If we accept that man cannot but be moral, then we have to accept that morality cannot be taught. Man, it is already ingrained in the human nature, but there are certain things, certain sources, which if we live with us from our infancy, then we can definitely shape our moral point of view. This is what, and that probably with that idea, many times discussions are coming that whether ethics should be introduced, the study of ethics should be introduced from the primary level. So this has been one of the issues which are discussed these days. Now, coming to the theme of Dr. Das, what he observed, that moral rules ought to be progressive, but they tend to be regressive. And he cited one example of corruption as a cultural crisis. Okay, corruption as a cultural crisis is of the present day India is not new to Indian culture. It exists from the days of Arthashastra. Kautilya has mentioned about corruption in several slokas, by which he tried to give the idea of corrupt practices and how the corruption can be checked, and all these ways and means for eradicating corruption in society. This is what I have observed. Now, coming to the value systems, keeping aside moksha as a value, if we take the Trivarga concept, then what is observed during present time, that dharma or righteousness is relegated to the background, and two things that are given importance, artha and kama. And during this pandemic period, you have observed the practice of this artha and kama, and every day you are getting in the newspaper, in the news, the pursuance of artha and kama, how the Sensex rises, how the people accumulate money, and how all the activities which should not have become the part of life in the present scenario. So these things, these are the observations, certain observations I have made on Dr. Das's view, and I now pass on the discussion to others. Let them express their observations or questions on this topic to Dr. Das. Please.
Ranjit Babu,
Yes.
can I say something?
Sure. Most welcome, please.
I thank our esteemed speaker, Dr. Kailash Chandra Das, for beautifully analyzing the problem and bringing so many issues in his presentation. While listening to his deliberation very keenly, I had some feeling. Let me present. I am not asking some questions, but some of my observations. I do believe that India had an argumentative tradition. But despite the fact that India had an argumentative tradition, Protestantism has always been ruthlessly suppressed, or it has been driven out from this country. Buddhism was wiped out. Philosophy of Charvak, all his literature were destroyed. And even whenever there is some attack or there is some challenge to the Brahminical Manubadi order, there is great reaction to it, historically speaking. As a consequence of this, for thousands of years, untouchability, caste discrimination, subjugation of women continued in India for centuries, even for millennium. But there was no reaction from the side of the philosophers against these social evils. This is one observation. And the second observation is, very often we say that Indian philosophy, Indian culture, Indian tradition are very old. We have been, despite all aggressions, attacks, our civilization has been existing, our culture is progressing. But at what level? This question very often comes to my mind. We have been existing, our culture, our civilization, our philosophy, so many things have been existing for millennia. But at what level? That is, why so many people are living at a subhuman level, even in 20th century, and most of the people are deprived of basic amenities of life. This is where lies the problem. So why have we not progressed? And sometimes we say Western civilization, Western culture is materialistic, Indian culture is spiritualistic. Yes, in Western society, after the Industrial Revolution, consumerism has developed, environmentally crisis has also emerged, there is lack of sustainable development, there is colonialism, all these things have come from the West. But still then, they have also given us many subtle values like democracy, like human rights, like dignity of man. So many moral ideals and moral values have emerged from West, which we have not at all contributed, though our is an ancient civilization, we have not made any significant contribution in these fields. Then another is, yes, he told that in Indian philosophy we find, in Indian philosophy there is mingling of religion, our scriptures and authoritative ideas. But in Western philosophy, Western tradition, philosophy has been freed from the religious domain. Because philosophy has been freed from the religious domain, so philosophy has made a very significant contribution in the West. But we are still confined within the 6 systems of philosophy, and we are not going beyond that. So these are some of the difficulties and some of our problems which came to my mind while listening to Kailash Babu's deliberation. I thank him very much, and I just pointed out some of my feelings. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sahu. So you want to, Professor Das, do you want to say something on?
No, yes.
Please.
I thank my revered Professor Sahu, Dhaneshwar Babu for very carefully evaluating whatever I've said. But there is a feeling also at sometimes I'm trying to, like a student of philosophy, I try to state that the problem with me is also like this, that why a lot of growth was done elsewhere in the Western world, in the field of science and technology. Also, some writings were there, great literature was created, which could not be created in the last and from the medieval period till now. But one part I am at least convinced that this country was under foreign rule, especially in the Indian society. It was in foreign rule for a long period. Many people think, like Professor Sahu made, that it's partially only true, that Britishers have contributed, the colonial rulers and masters have contributed in a way of development of this country. But at the same time, I would say that there is the industry in India, the industrial growth in India and the economic status was much better when the British arrived here. The cottage industry was in a very good situation, and they have spoiled everything. So this is a thorough exploitation of financial exploitation and cultural exploitation and imposition of their own culture for the last 200 years might have caused this havoc. So I say that the culture thrives in spite of adversity. This is one of the adversities. And always this country has been attacked from, if you look at the history. So might be this is the reason for which a lot of intellectual growth during this period, either medieval period and from 17th century to 18th century, also we don't find perceptibly great thoughts in Indian systems. And this is one part of the answer. But I also do agree with this that the great values that is taught are of a nature of values that is sustaining a society for a longer period to come. That is what my conviction of these values. So we are, I think, in a better position. So, religious, that the problem of also hermeneutic problem. How to evaluate a culture, how to evaluate a civilization, from which perspective? The perspective is from today's Western perspective. We are exposed to a Western literature, Western culture in a great way. We studied the Indian philosophy in English language. So the window through which we look at Indian philosophy, how the Indian boys are reading Indian philosophy? Most of you are interested in Indian philosophy just because of a curiosity. What Professor Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya will say, that we have not studied Indian philosophy to find some wisdom is there or not. We have studied out of a curiosity. Is there anything that is really great about it? So that is our problem actually. So I tried to free my mind from the thing that I am not going to find only the weaknesses of the Indian systems, but also it has got some strength or not. But that there are strengths, and there are many things which are not coming to the light because of this so many years of foreign rules might be, and our society was suffering from superstitions, dogmas, and it was in a very darkest periods were also there. Whereas great values were also taught, great stories were also written, as I have given the examples how the rest of the world, Buddhism went to the rest of the world, like ASEAN, most of the Asian countries have adopted it. And so many of the writings, ancient writings were also praised elsewhere, not even if it is not recognized at that time in the Indian scenario. That the picture. So the hermeneutical problem is that we have to understand that society and the rules they have framed in that society from which perspective. That perspective makes the difference to evaluate that. So now that there is a moral value, progressive values, and we find that traces of moral progressive values are also taught there, and people have started doing this. Buddhism is quite old.
Dr. Das, shall I intervene?
Sure.
Now you are. I don't think we have to blame the our English learning and this thing, the media of instruction, all these things. Because you see, the books you are referring, Hitopadesa and Panchatantra, I am again going back to that, and Aesop's fables in English. So you will find definitely a commonality. The moral ideas, the moral views of these fables, and those things are now totally out of the scene from the life of our sons and daughters and their sons and daughters, and in this way these things are simply vanishing. So in all said and done, we have to go back to the roots through this type of things, by which it will be more accessible for the young minds from the very beginning of their lives, instead of inculcating the philosophical systems of Vedanta or Buddhism into their mind. This type of things will definitely, I feel, will make them moral to at least to some extent. Whenever they will before doing something, they will think that what will be the consequence. That is actually the moral issue, that as man we know before doing something that what will be the consequence. So if these things, these type of fables will help our next gen and next gen, then I think that will be more beneficial for the Indian people. Thank you. Please, any other question?
A small point, Ranjit Babu, small point. Before British came, sometimes we say we have suffered or we are backward because of the foreign domination in our country, Muslim domination or British domination. But before the British came, there were 540 states, small and big. Britishers brought India into a political unity. That had there been no Britishers, I do not know what would have been the future of this country, because India, there are 540 states in India, each was sovereign, and our languages are also different. We do not speak same language. Our adjacent state is Andhra, but we cannot understand anything of Andhra. Their language, their culture, their literature, we cannot follow. They cannot follow ours, we cannot follow theirs. So there are some natural barriers as well as cultural barriers. And similarly, who told us that we are all Hindus? It is the Muslims who told us that we are all Hindus. Only it is in 18th or 19th century, after the Muslims invasion, they said all those are non-Hindus, they are Hindus. So there are so many problems associated with our culture, with our society. It's very difficult to find this answer.
Professor Sao, you see, here also Britishers might have helped us, and subsequently because of the intervention of during a post-independence era, all this reorganization of states have taken place on the basis of language. Okay, but still the integration, national integration, is not there, because we are still the evils are there. The regionalism is there, the linguism is there. All these things are there. But you take similarly, in a similar way, you take the case of USSR. USSR was a combined state, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. And after that, that balkanization took place, and again it separated. But all those mixing and separating, they never actually separates the cultural issues. They separate just the economic issues. And economic mixing or unmixing, those things are there. But culturally, that the spirit of India, that is definitely felt throughout India. Even if the regionalism is there, even if the linguism is there, all these things are there. Britishers might have helped us, and subsequently by the year of and the name is not coming, during the post-independent era. We find this how the states were merged into the Indian Union. So all these situations never keep us aside from the cultural or the valuational aspects of the nation. This is what. So India should be treated as a nation and not anything else. That nation, Bharat, that is most important. This is what I think. Please, any other question, please? Sir, kichi kuhantu, Professor G.P. Das, please.
ए भाई एथरे बहुत अड़ुआ अछि मो एथरे पार्टिसिपेट करबिनी एथरे बहुत अड़ुआ अछि बहुत प्री सपोजिशन अछि प्रति प्री सपोजिशन को डिस्कशन कले ना गोटे गोटे क्लास हबो आई डिसिस्ट फ्रॉम दैट थैंक यू
Professor Pramod Babu kichi kuhantu.
Sir, my question to Professor Sahu, what should we do now? Should we invite Britishers for another 100 years to rule us, to learn values from them? Should we do that? Please respond, sir. Should we
The values are who says it? Who says we should invite Britishers? But they have also gave us the concept of parliamentary democracy, concept of secularism, concept of human dignity. We have all borrowed these ideas from the Western civilization. This we cannot deny it. So far, have we been able to destroy even caste system in this age? Our society has been widely discriminated on the basis of caste system. Communal feelings are there. These are some of our evils. By introspecting our own evils, we can think of how we can grow in a better way and develop a humanistic culture in the present scenario. Nobody will say that we should invite British or any other country. Who says this? But whatever evils are there in our society, there should be some sincere attempt, sincere desire from the side of the administration, people, and all others, philosophers, all others, so that we can build up a better society, because we always think of a better society, a better existence, and better life. That is my submission.
sir,
रंजित सर अध मिनिट नेबी गोटे सार्ट सूरत रे तैयारी थिबो सेटा हमें किनिया पे जतिकी लालायित न हबु सेही सार्ट अपन सिंगापुर देके आसिले से सार्ट को हमें अति आग्रह रे बेसी पैसा दे किनिबु जदि उपनिषद से जदि गीता रे जदि महाभारत रे रामायण रे डिग्निटी ऑफ मैन कॉन्सेप्ट नाही ताल जगत रे कोउठी नाही ब्रिटिशर माने एटा को हमको सिखैथिले बोली कहिले दैट विल बी अ ग्रेट ट्रावेस्टी ऑफ ट्रुथ दिस इज ओनली वन एग्जांपल आउ भितर को जिबिनी
जो जदि शास्त्र रे एते कथा थिला तार कोउठी ट्रांसलेटेड हेथिला हम सोशल लाइफ रे एपर्यंत भी अनटचेबिलिटी हम सोसाइटी रे अछि
हेई नथिला बोली कहि परिबा एठी बस स्पेकुलेटिव हिस्ट्री करियो कि हमें
नहीं, this is the hard reality.
Sir,
स्पेकुलेटिव हार्ड रियलिटी जमारू नुए
Professor Sahu, you told that in spite of individualism, communalism, colonialism of the Westerners, they had some merit points. They have certain value. They have some values. Similarly, in spite of some problems in our culture, we have also some cardinal values. We believe in some cardinal values. We have also some merits. Western culture has some merit and demerit, and Indian culture has also some merits and demerits. So, why should we speak like this? What is the point? I fail to understand. What should we do now? Should we leave India? Should we invite them to rule us, to teach us about our own value? This is my reaction.
There is some disturbance. Pramod Babu, my submission is that look, one thing at least there is a lot of things that we really cannot solve over few minutes. That what is the very greatness about all of us that is there. But one thing I observed is that Indian value systems are to a great extent, the religious, which is derived from this religious culture, is a great extent is so dynamic and so inclusive that even Buddhism was included in as Buddha was included as an avatar in Hinduism. That is the inclusiveness of this thing. There are some negative points. I don't disagree with Professor Sahu as he said, but at the same time, I would say that there is some internal dynamism in this religion or these values which are accepting other values very clearly. We understand one of the things I would like to give example of Gandhi's accepting punctuality as a value. Indian systems nowhere punctuality is given importance, but Gandhi has accepted. So this acceptance is not that we are going, we're just not against our Indian values. The values say that even for fulfillment of our values, we can accept any further values. That openness, that flexibility, that dynamism is a great characteristic of Indian values that as we see. But there was a period of decadence, and the period is having its effects till death. There is a period of social decadence, and there is a period when this all evils of caste system has come. The evils of caste system for which nobody can forgive anybody in why it has happened, what consequences it has got, and from which society it evolved, that has to be led. But the dynamism of the culture is such that it is going to accept it. And today, 100 years or 200 years or 500 years is not a very long period in the history of a civilization. So for some period, this thing may be there, but for thousands of years, which has survived, maybe because the reason that it is dynamism, it is not very rigid. That is one of the observations that I have made about the system, and I make my mind open to accept whatever is reasonable to accept. So this is
all
I am
right,
saying about
Dr. Das. We are in constraint of time, as Professor GP Das said. Today's discussion is bringing many discussions within it. So let us call it a day for today. And now I request, because of the constraint of time and as for the schedule, I now request Dr. Kailas Maharana to conclude the session.
Okay, thanks so much, sir. Really, it is a pleasure for me to offer gratitude to all of you, to offer gratitude to the chairperson of today's session, Professor Ranjit Ghosh sir. My sincere gratitude goes to Professor Ramakanta Nanda, Professor Kailas Chandra Das sir, who have presented beautifully their topics, their scheduled topics. We all have been benefited out of their deliberation, discussions, and responses made by our learned participants. I must feel honored to offer my gratitude to our teacher, Professor GP Das sir, who has guided me and designed the program. And
Thank you.
His participation has glorified us, has enriched the program. I offer my gratitude to him. I offer my gratitude to all the senior teachers present here on the occasion of Guru Purnima. My sincere thanks to all the participants, but my faculty member Prakash Kumar Sethi is with me. May I request him to offer a hearty vote of thanks to the chairperson, to the speakers, to the participants, to the advisors, and to all the viewers across the country who have been connected with us, who have supported us, and who have made the entire series of lectures a meaningful and successful. Over to Sri Prakash Kumar Sethi to offer a vote of thanks, to present a vote of thanks.
Thank you,
Hello.
sir.
Prakash,
Yes,
yes.
First of all, I wish you a happy Guru Purnima day. Good afternoon to all. Today is the last day of ICPI sponsored webinar. I extend my thanks to chairman and program officer and governing body members of ICPI for sanctioning grant of her college for celebrating on Indian philosophy and practical life. Thank you. Our chairperson, Dr. Ranjit Ghosh sir, distinguished speaker, Dr. Ramakanta Nanda sir, Dr. Kailash Chandra Das sir, respected head of department, Kailash sir, all the participants and my dear students. I deem it a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this webinar is meaningful. It's a proud privilege to have such an eminent personality among with us, our chairperson, Dr. Ranjit sir, who has spared his